episode of Pivotal Moments with Lolita. We have yet another amazing guest joining today's conversation. I have Greg with me who's going to tell us a little bit about his own personal pivotal moments and all the things that he is doing in the consulting world. So I am super excited to have him on the show today. Welcome, Greg. I gave a little introduction, but why don't you tell people a little bit more about what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me here today, Lolita. I'm really just honored to be a guest and just have a little conversation with you. I'm the founder and CEO of 5C Consulting. We're based here in Lake Ridge, Virginia. We're a management and human capital consulting firm, and we're serving our community. We like to help small businesses and meet small to medium enterprises improve the way they manage their people. They set their people up to win and yeah, I mean, there's a lot underneath that, but that's essentially the high level.
I love it. I love it. And what a definite need we have for that. So I love it. Well, welcome to the conversation. I know we've had a couple of conversations previously, so I've been looking forward to this. So, pivotal moments, I'm sure, whenever I have people on the conversation, they're always like, I had to figure out which pivotal moment to actually go with. Do I go with the professional? Do I go with the one that was last week or 10 years ago? So, what are you going to be sharing with us today?
Oh my God, I'm still thinking about it. I mean, there's a couple highlights in my life. I had a pivotal moment when my parents decided to end their marriage, and I became a child of divorce. When I Another one was when I relocated a few years later with my mother to a new city. Another one was I decided to just take life in my own hands and I hit the streets. Another one was I came to a faith in Christ. Fast forward, I mean, there's all these pivotal moments, but I think the most recent and significant one was 5 years ago when my wife and I, with our two children, decided to leave New York and come to Northern Virginia with no network, no job promise, just kind of like parachuting in. And then I decided to launch a business. And so I think that one may be it's the most fresh. It made me
Yeah.
the most relevant for our discussion. But just the shift between regions, the shift and how we approach moving. Because my background is ministry. Before I did this, I was full-time staff in a local multi-site church. I led a congregation. Um, so shifting from that world to the business world has been a pivot as well.
Wow. It's so, when we start talking about just some of the pivots and some of the shifts, it's just amazing. I always find it interesting that when we tell our stories or tell different chapters of our lives, we can tell it so seamlessly, but it's like they were filled with meaning and emotions and things. So I appreciate you even giving us some snippets of previous pivots, but let's talk about it. So, making a huge move like that, uprooting your family, having to start fresh, changing your whole career focus, that I can certainly understand was a lot. And when we think about the whole pivotal moment and we think about that thing that we're making the changes around it, the actual pivot, what would you say was that thing? Like, what stayed unmovable that you were able to see was like, this is the thing that's important, that's unchanging, that I will make the pivots around that?
Yeah, so I think you're really insightful, first of all, in any
Thank you.
change to ask, well, what's going to stay the same? Because as we lead organizations and people through change, one of the first conversations is to say, well, you need to anchor yourself to something that's going to be consistent. And so, insightful question right there. Um, One, my wife and I mean, our faith is still very important to us. We're not as connected or as involved in our local church as we were. I mean, we were at the center of it then. And we came and we said, we're going to step back. We're going to be involved, but we're going to step back as far as the role relationship to local church. But our faith was still centered for us. Um, my relationship with my wife is still central to us. And I think the other thing is the commitment of my own vision to build that life that I'm aiming for. The balance between adding value and being remunerated for that, if you will, creating a life for my family, but also being a contributor in the community. And so
Wow.
that the method to get there has been like trial and error, but the vision has never shifted.
Wow, I love it. And you said something very key, which is about that commitment, to fulfilling your vision. And I think that's so important to emphasize because we have to be committed to those visions that we have. We have to, because, like you said, it's not going to be a straight path and there's going to be a lot of obstacles. But I think understanding what that unchangeable thing is, like you said, the thing that grounds you, the thing people sometimes say your why, understanding that I think is what helps us to be able to keep committed to that. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to, and honestly, there's a remaking. If you're going to pursue something that you've never achieved before, if you're going to aim higher than most of the peers around you have achieved, I mean, there's going to be a lot of rewriting of who you are in
Mm,
that process. Because if you don't rewrite and change your own narrative about yourself and the world, it's going to be difficult to get there because otherwise you would
mm.
have had it, right? And if
Yeah,
you're aiming
yeah.
high, you're aiming for something that's out of reach. Well, that means you have to become something different. And in my experience, before you become something different, you got to begin a new story that leads you to someone different. So there's a tremendous amount of internal growth, personal growth, um, in that process.
Wow. And I've heard the expression, change the narrative. I have heard that expression. People use that, but I love really thinking about it from the aspect of rewriting yourself. I think a lot of times we don't think about that. I think sometimes we're actually even afraid to accept, that we have to rewrite ourselves. So many times we're trying to prove, oh, I'm who I am and this is who I am, but it is okay to rewrite your story in the sense of rewriting who you are, changing your belief systems and some of those things that have limited you from pursuing healthy relationships and healthy businesses and things like that. So I love that you brought that out.
And it's kind of like here's an illustration or an analogy. I mean, you play video games, or have you ever played them? Like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
like even character games, journey games, where you've got to go through like a couple things. You got to get skill or experience, and then you get to up level. Like so, you're not changing your character; you're just up leveling it.
I love it. I think that will be a hashtag.
And we could just all play video games. Like this, just life is just a video game, right? We're
Right. The
just
lesson from today's pivotal moment is just play video games.
yeah.
No, I love it.
If you crash and burn, just get a new life. Start over.
Exactly. If only.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, so switching gears a little bit, those that have watched this show know that I always switch it up a little bit and talk about the adjustment aspect. When I was putting this whole thing together, it was interesting to me that adjustment and pivot really, while very similar, they actually have a different tone in their definition. And that adjustment really is about adapting to something that could be unfamiliar or unpleasant. And so, when you think about that, can you talk about a time where you've had to adjust, maybe rather instead of making the pivot?
Hmm. Interesting question. So adjusting, like I think if I just focus on that as I'm hearing it, I had to make some adjustments, like psychological mental adjustments to how long the process would take. So when we came here again, we had a family. two young boys. We now have four, one girl, and so we've grown since we moved to Virginia. Um, and my wife is home. She's been home. That was her dream, and so I'm the sole provider. And there's been seasons where we weren't not bringing in revenue, so I had to adjust and do other things to take care of business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and so I've taken on things that are not within the scope that I've set out on, but they've allowed me the freedom to survive it and to kind of re-engage. And so I think that's kind of getting to the heart of what you're talking about. Um, yeah, so that'd be one point of adjustment.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that out because, I've had many, many conversations now on this platform and in other environments. And one thing that can be very frustrating for people is when that expectation is delayed. When, like you said, you're just not maybe bringing the income in or getting the clients or getting the selling the products or whatever it is. And I like that you said you adjusted, you did something that maybe, wasn't necessarily your favorite thing or wasn't in line with maybe the actual business itself, but it allowed you to be able to continue on your
Mhm.
course of what you are ultimately trying to accomplish. And I think that's so key to remember that making the adjustment doesn't have to feel like a failure, but it's actually a win because it keeps us on that path to the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and to really boil it down, I mean, money is a vehicle; it's not the destination. And so, how you acquire that allows you to move forward. Allows you to move forward. Now, obviously, folks listening to this show, young women, listening to this show, are asking themselves, I want to do X. How do I get there? Well, we all need some kind of revenue to survive, um, and so you've got to be able to create that. And the more effectively you create that, the quicker you get to what you want, whatever you define success as. And for some people, they've created a stream of income through something that's not necessarily their thing, but it's such a strong income stream, they can do what they want and they can give back. For others, like, work is meaningful. Work is meaningful. And so they just enjoy the work. And so as long as they have enough of revenue to take care of take care of home, they can do what's meaningful to them. So what I'm trying to get at is how you generate that income is not always as relevant as the fact that you are pursuing something. It's allowing you to pursue what you really want to pursue.
Wow. Yeah, that's it. Well, as we come to the end of the conversation, which is always the sad part, what message, what quote, inspiration, whatever it is that you have, what would you like to say in addition to the gems you've already dropped? What would you like to say to those watching right now?
Um, I think another big lesson that I've had the last several years in through training, um, and just stepping into the business space is the ability to honor other people's stories and other people's perspectives, and to make a priority of listening. And so that I think has been a hugely enriching and still is enriching practice. It is not easy. It is not easy, and it's not always comfortable because you know I have a general worldview. I've held a fairly general worldview for a couple decades, and I've tried to not cast it in stone. But there's certain things that have just settled. My faith is pretty settled. Who I am as a man has settled. And if you're on a journey, if you're younger, if you're under 40, if you're under 35, if you're still kind of asking a lot of questions, go out and taste. Go and test things. Test yourself. Find some limits. Don't be afraid to take some risk. Um, I mean, don't go so far that you're going to harm yourself for a decade or take a decade to recover, but go out and try things and be in a position where you can say, hey, I don't know what I think about that. It's okay. You don't have to have a staunch opinion on something today. And in congruence with this is really be open to listening to the other side of your perspective. And so you may have a perspective and opinion on something. I encourage you, study the opposition, truly get to understand it, because it is going to enrich your perspective. It may shift the way you see things. It may reinforce it and just make you a better communicator of your perspective. But if you only listen to one thing, if you only focus in one channel, or you only pay attention to one point of view, you're really limiting your ability to contribute to society. That's what I would add, if as long as it's coming through clearly.
Yeah, very clearly. And I again, I really appreciate that. In my second book, I talked a lot about patterns and our belief systems and perceptions and things like that. And on a very surface, high level of perception, what you're saying makes so much sense, because we do have these opinions and these beliefs that we have formed. And our brain is so beautifully designed that its job is to fit everything into a pattern. And so at a certain point, it's if we have limited exposure, it's very easy for everything that we see to just fit into the already, perfectly sized pattern that we have for it. But if we start to really expand what we see, what we do, who we talk to, we're really making our brain have to work harder, right? Which makes us have to pay more attention and say, wait a minute, this doesn't fit in this category. Well, let me take a look at that a little bit more and see, where do I need to fit this? So I think, of course, that's my non-scientific way of breaking it down.
Well, I mean,
but
just to even build on top of that. So if you're in business, your business judgment is unique and has value. It's one of the few things that distinguishes everybody, your business judgment. You have to build that. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes through experience. It comes through reading and exposure. You have to expose yourself to different things. You have to understand what's going on in your industry, in your community, in your market. You've got to understand what's going on with people. You're not going to understand that if you're listening to one channel. You have to listen to multiple channels and work at integrating them so that your business judgment actually can serve its purpose. And you do that, and you will be bringing value wherever you go.
There it is. That's it right there. I love it, love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you for joining the conversation. I have a feeling that I will definitely need to be bringing you back because I would love to hear about some of those other moments and gather, your insights on some of the different other moments that you've gone through as well. But certainly appreciate you sharing, such an amazing journey and how you and your family have been able to keep on climbing and keep on going through your pivot. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a real delight to meet you just in the last couple of weeks. And obviously, we've had several other conversations. I'm really honored to be here with you today. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg, so much. Well, once again, it's been another episode of Pivotal Moments with Lolita. I know you're probably like me and you hate to see it end. So we will just keep these conversations going. And as always, thank you so much for your support and for tuning in to Pivotal Moments with Lolita. We will see you next time.